welcome to the Team Legacy Invaders YouTube channel. This is Benji, and we're going to continue the Comprehensive Infernoid guide into part 2, which is on the actual Void support. Now, I'm going to show the cards live that I actually have, and the cards I don't actually have, whether it be that they're just not good anymore, or I don't play them, or I've misplaced them. For whatever reason, I'm going to display on the side, and so we'll explain what they do. So first up, it's probably the most important Void spell or trap, and that is Void Banishment. Void Banishment actually has several parts to it, so I'm just going to read through the whole card text. You can discard one card, which is a cost, and add one Void spell or trap card from your deck to your hand, except for except for itself, or Null and Void, which has had a name change, so that shouldn't be a problem anymore. Also, it's a terrible card. So you discard a card, search for any Void spell or trap, anything other than this, which means you get access to every other card there is to play in the deck. Once you use that effect, which is once per turn, you can only summon Infernoids for the rest of the turn. So that means there's only the one extra deck monster, the 10 main deck monsters, and that's it. Can't really play anything else. But because it says for the rest of the turn, that means you can summon them beforehand. So if there's like a monster you want to normal summon, you can do that. Now it says you can't normal or special summon non-Infernoids, but you can still perform a normal set, which I've done before because I was teching in some cards, and I summoned this and then set over it to summon additional monsters. Alright, so let's take a look at the rest of the card. It has a second effect, which says, if an Infernoid monster you control battles an opponent's monster, after damage calculation, you can send this card to the graveyard and banish both of those monsters. So your monster doesn't even have to win the battle. It doesn't matter if it won or lost. It doesn't matter if any monster was destroyed. You just send this to the graveyard and both cards get banished. And it's during damage calculation, so they can't really respond to it with much. Now, this card does lose pretty big to Ghost Ogre and MST and anything else, because you do pay a cost, but most of your discards are irrelevant. Back in the day, people didn't know what this card did. They tended to just let it go. So there's a good chance people will just let this card go. So let's take a look at the other Void spells. The first one up alphabetically, just because they're coming up on the computer screen here, is Into the Void, which I don't own. So Into the Void is a spell card that says you can activate this card only if you have 3 or more cards in your hand. Draw one card, and then during the end phase, discard all cards in your hand. So this is used generically in a lot of decks. It's been used in Klee, and it's been used in Exodia Draw decks and FTK decks. But it's actually a searchable card with Void Banishment. And it does combo well with one of the traps, which we'll get to, but honestly, I don't see the point in playing it, because if you search one, unless you have the other ones, it's kind of dead. The goal is to get all 3 of them quickly, just draw them, and then make your deck into somewhat of a 37-card deck by just doing quick draws. Alright, next up is probably the most known one, the most known Void spell or trap, which came out same time. This one wasn't being used at first because no one really wanted to search any of the cards, but this is was probably the most commonly played card, Void Seer. It's a variation of Return of the Dragon Lords. Here's what it says. It's a quick play spell card. Target one Infernoid monster you control. That target is unaffected by the opponent's card effects this turn. So if you target one of your monsters, it'll be unaffected by card effects. You can pretty much do whatever you want with your card, nothing will happen to it. And because it's quick play, if your opponent tries to do something to it, you can target your monster. It has a secondary effect. It says, if an Infernoid monster or monsters you control would be destroyed by a card effect, you can banish this card from the graveyard instead of destroying one of those monsters. So it's kind of like a weaker variation of Return of the Dragon Lords, because you can only protect one monster. And when it makes your cards unaffected, it's only from your opponent's cards. So if you try to like Anoku, your monster will die. So if we play this guy and then summon Anoku, we can't protect him with this, because this is our own card effect. Now, on the other hand, if this is in the graveyard, and then I summon this, and since he would be destroyed, we can banish this to protect him. So it does have some synergy with your own cards. so that's what this one does. It's particularly useful, especially if it gets milled accidentally. No one really remembers if this card gets milled, and then your opponent pays for it big time. All right, now the more commonly played spell card now is Void Imagination. This card has two effects. Firstly, when it's played face up on the field, it has what sounds like a bad effect. Infernoid monsters you control, whose original level is 2 or higher, become level 1, which means all of them become level 1 except for Permeus and Decatron, because Decatron's original level is 1. So this doesn't affect Decatron. All battle damage is, and the battle damage that those monsters inflict is halved. So your monsters other than Decatron will do half damage that are Infernoids. Then its more important effect says you can send this card from your graveyard to fusion summon one Infernoid fusion monster. There is only one, so Infernoid Tiara from your extra deck, using monsters from your hand. So if you have some in your hand, some in your deck, some from your hand or field as fusion materials. So you can fuse Tiara using your hand or your field, which is normal, just like polymerization. You send this as cost. But if your opponent controls a monster that was special summoned from the extra deck and you do not, you can also send up to 6 Infernoids from your deck to the graveyard as fusion material. So that's how we actually reach the goal of the 8 and 10 monster count for the fusion here. So if you use the fusion spell and send it to the graveyard, you could send 6 Infernoids to do the fusion. So you need that, and what else do we got here? All right, so you need 6. You send the maximum just to get your graveyard filled up for plays. So we send 6, and if we have more in our hand, we can reach the 8 and then the 10 monster count. All right, so this card is kind of iffy because, well, this card's clearly good, and this card's clearly good. This card's a little iffy because it's not clear if just playing this at any time is particularly useful. It's not particularly. What you really want to do is search the card when your opponent controls an extra deck monster and you don't, and then just use it to gain advantage. But it's also important to put out a monster that you could use to get rid of your own Tiara, because Tiara locks you up pretty good. Although you can also use this to banish the Tiara when attacking their monsters. Now, in reference to just making your monsters level 1, you can then, if you make them all level 1, you can actually summon like a full field of big monsters and so on until you kill your opponent. And just because they do half damage doesn't mean their attacks are halved. They can actually still get over everything pretty easily. They are pretty big monsters. Another option is you can actually summon all of your monsters and then fuse from your deck, which will then make everybody's attack full and will allow you to summon more monsters than you normally could have. So that's one of the tricks to this guy. There are another couple of cards that you might play, which we'll talk about in non-archetypal support the next video. Like Galaxy Cyclone, if that's in your graveyard, you can get rid of this, or you can use Petrula to destroy this. Also, Fairy Tale Snow, which we'll talk about, then can be used to banish this right off of the field, which can boost up your attack points. So there's a lot of ways to deal with this card's negative effects. Alright, so there's one more Void spell card, which I don't have a copy of at the moment. I've had a copy of it, I don't know what happened to it. So I'll just display it on the screen. And that is Void Expansion, which is a field spell. It's an interesting field spell, and most people probably don't like it or haven't tried it, so I'm just going to read this out. During your standby phase, you can special summon one Infernoid token. Where is the monster? You can summon one Infernoid token, level 1, fire type, 0 attack, 0 defense. And so that's during your standby phases. You can summon these tokens and they're level 1. And because they're tokens, they're normal monsters, so they don't count against the level count of Infernoids. So that's useful. Now, this is what the actual spell card gives you to do. It says, to summon an Infernoid monster using its own summoning procedure, you can banish Infernoid monsters you control instead of those in the graveyard, or any combination of both. So now if I want to summon Petrula, I can banish this token. So if I have the field spell out, I can do that. But what's also neat is now if I want to summon Antra, I can actually banish the Petrula over this one. So it lets you actually summon over the other Infernoids on your field. So that's one thing it does. It doesn't let you summon past the level limit. So in this case, if we have this on the field, we can't actually summon another Infernoid because we're still at level 10. But it is possible that if we have like a token here with this guy, we can still summon a big guy by using the token and two others in grade. So it gives you some flexibility on how you can summon your monsters. I kind of wish that the Infernoids could have already banished the on-field Infernoids to summon them, but you can't. So it's a neat little thing it does for it. Additionally, it's useful because when you level lock yourself playing Inoku or Deviati, it's really hard to get out monsters to use for their tribute fodder, for their negation effects. So if you have the field spell out, you can just make a token every turn during your standby phase, so you'll have something to tribute for them. The field spell actually has one more effect, which I didn't get to yet. So it says your opponent cannot target Infernoid monsters you control for attacks or with card effects, except for the Infernoid monster you control with the highest level, and they get to choose if tied. So if you have these two monsters and the field spell out, your opponent can only target Inoku for attacks or card effects. And since the tokens are level 1, generally they'll just live on the field. Your opponent won't be able to deal with them. The only problem with that particular effect is generally you'll make your Decatron into Deviati. So it'll be level 10, and then they'll have an option of this guy and this guy. So it's not as safe as it sounds, but it's not bad. All right, I haven't used this card in a while. I have used it before, though. All right, so let's take a look at the Void Trap cards. The first one up I actually don't own, so I'll just put it up on the screen. It's Void Trap Hole. So there's a searchable trap hole in the Infernoid archetype. When your opponent special summons a monster with 2,000 or more attack, or multiple monsters with 2,000, and at least one of them has 2,000 or more attack, negate the effects of one of those monsters with 2,000 or more attack, and if you do, destroy it. So you can negate its effect and destroy it. So it's not bad. It's just a generic trap hole card. It's kind of nice that it's searchable. I haven't used it in the deck before. But I mean, if you're going to search, your opponent can very easily play around a search trap hole card. But there might be matchups where it makes sense to actually side it, being a searchable protection card. I haven't done it, I'm just going to be honest. All right. Next up is probably the current strongest card in the Infernoid archetype. The Void archetype anyway, the Void support is Void Feast. It says send one Void spell or trap card from your hand or face up on your side of the field to the graveyard. So if you have this on your field, you can actually clear this off your field by sending it to the graveyard as cost for this effect. So yeah, you can send this from your hand, or you can send it from the field. You can even play Void Seer. Play Void Seer, targeting one of your monsters, and then send that as cost. If you have multiple Void Seers, and generally people play more of those, you can actually play Void Seer, send it to the graveyard for Void Feast, and then use Void Feast to send the other Void Feast to the graveyard, and then play another Void Feast and send the other Void Feast to the graveyard. All right, so that's how the cost works, but let's actually talk about what the card does. All right, so send one Void spell or trap card from your hand or face up on your side of the field to the graveyard. Special summon up to 3 Infernoid monsters from your deck whose total level is 8, ignoring their summoning conditions. So that gives you access to just a Tondel, Sightsmoss with 1 Decatron, or Prometheus. And then the reason that Sajet became popular is you get 2 Decatrons and Sajet, and there are so many combos you can do based on how you pick the levels and choices of these monsters and what to do with them. So that's why this card is so crazy. Then there are some other options. You can put out this guy with level 2. So there's a lot of, obviously, decisions to make on how you summon these monsters. I mean, I feel like occasionally, if you're playing against like a back row deck, this might be a more standard setup for these. You might do Petrula and Decatron to kill 2 back row, and Hermetic to kill a monster. But you could also use the level 6 with 2 Decatrons and get similar setups. All right, some people just play this card just to put out 2 Decatrons, make them 1 Inoku, 1 Deviati, and play a defensive negate game. But I personally think that's the incorrect play. You don't want to lock up your levels 1, 2. You run out of fodder to summon really fast that way. So making them the smaller monsters is actually sometimes better. All right, so that leaves us with a few more trap cards to discuss. All right. Let's see, where are we at? Eye of the Void, which I'm sure I own, I just don't have it here, so I'll just put up a picture. Eye of the Void says, special summon 1 Infernoid monster from your hand, ignoring its summoning conditions, but its effects are negated until the end of this turn. So it's just a generic trap card. If you have an Infernoid in your hand, you can just play it to the field. So if this is in your hand and you have these 2 guys on board, you can just drop this and you'll put over 8,000 on the board. Because this deck has some issues putting 8,000 on board, but so that card would let you just drop a monster. What I was using it for a while ago, when less support was out, is I would use it during my opponent's end phase, and I would drop Petrula to the field. And the reason I would do that is because once my turn came up, his effect would be live. And commonly played at the time was Imperial Ironwall, which says cards can't be banished, which really made it really hard to do anything with your deck. So I would side that in, I would search it, and then I would drop this, and then I would kill that. It was a slow process, but you do what you have to do to not lose. So that's Eye of the Void. And now my favorite 2 cards. First up is Void Purification, which is kind of a troublesome card. Here, I'll read out its effects. It has 2 effects. All right, the first part is more of a continuous effect. If you control a monster that is not an Infernoid monster, send this card to the graveyard. So if you control a face-down monster, this automatically goes to the graveyard. Kind of like a BA monster. If you control any other monster, you can normal summon Maxi, and this will go to the graveyard. So this conflicts with mixing the deck if you want to play these 2 cards. I personally think they're great. So I play the pure build, but other people, almost no one plays this card. But I think the effect is absolutely amazing. So let's run through what it does. During your opponent's standby phase, you can target 1 Infernoid monster from your graveyard and add it to your hand. So what I like to do is during my opponent's draw phase, or the standby phase, is I'll use my Decatron, I'll tribute it off to banish a card in the graveyard, and then I'll use Purification to add it back to my hand. And then every turn, just make the same play, using Decatron to spot removal a card, then tribute it off and banish a card in the graveyard, and then add it back to hand. The only issue with that is occasionally you want to pick off a set card with Prometheus, so you make him Prometheus, and then there's nothing in the graveyard to banish, so you can't get it off the field. I also use this to get around some weird decks like Pure Kaijus, because you can't really leave monsters on board, so you can just tribute your monsters off and then keep adding them to your hand and then just keep playing them again and again. So it's kind of fun. And as a second effect, which is during your standby phase, you can target 1 of your banished Infernoid monsters and return it to the graveyard. So refilling the your area of use. So just using this will let you recycle monsters to grave to hand and from banished back to grave, whether it be to gain access to them or to have something to summon another monster that's already there. All right, and then the last Void card I also play, and I haven't seen anybody else play it really in a tournament. Matter of fact, I'm the only person I've even seen a video for who has a regional top with these cards in their deck. So maybe someone else has done it. I'm just not aware. So this is Void Launch. Void Launch says during your standby phase, you can send 2 Infernoid monsters from your deck to the graveyard. If you control a monster that is not an Infernoid monster, send this card to the graveyard. So this one has the same flaw as the other card. And during your standby phases, you can send any 2 Infernoid monsters from your deck to the graveyard. So you can put a Decatron in there if you have Purification up to add that to your hand on the following turn. You can purposely put in your Heavy Storm. If your opponent has back row that you want to deal with, you can send your Dark Hole. You can send your non-targeted Banishing card. And you get to send 2. So you get to send a card to use as the cost for summoning and the card to actually deal with a problem card. So I personally like all these. I think of this as Pot of Greed. Sending any 2 monsters in your deck to the graveyard is pretty good. It also you tend to send the big ones because the little ones you still need them in your hand to use them. You can send the big ones, which is like you drew them without having to draw them. So you can get away from needing to draw into your monsters, and then you can just get straight to your spells and traps and the other support of your deck, because you're not going to be playing just void cards. There are always other things in your deck. Alright, so in the next video, we'll talk about some non-archetypal support, so other things like this deck combos well with other decks. So we'll look at what other kinds of cards might do that. Cards that tend to fill the graveyard, like Light Swarms and things of that nature, fall into that category, and we'll see them next time.
And if you like what you saw, you can find one of our latest uploads right here. Also, YouTube has recommended this video for you. Click here to make sure you subscribe to our channel to get updates as soon as they occur. See you next time.